more than my take, and you don't have a number? All right, call the meeting order at 6:35 p.m. You know, if you have an Apple phone, you can take that.
I could take on this one. I choose not to.
Choose not to. All right.
Because I'll just ask Trish for this copy of his minutes. For the video.
Old business?
Okay, that's what the question
Hey, buddy.
is. You were wondering how to do that.
No old business? Seeing as we have no old business, we'll go to the approval of the minutes, aren't ready yet.
Not ready.
This is one of the problems when we don't have our minutes takers. Chris is working on the minutes, but he's busy. All right, schedule update, that would be Alan Minkus.
Okay, the colorful one, 11 by 17 that you've seen before. We have the current status line now on May 13th, the time is marching on. And you can see nothing has changed from the schedule that you saw last week, except we took off the alternate dates for submitting the preferred schematic report. We're on target right now for the June 11th submission of that. We still don't know if the MSBA is going to look at it with their Facilities Assessment Subcommittee on June 24th or July 8th, but they will be looking at it for approval of the preferred schematic solution on the board meeting on July 29th that you see there in blue. Blue indicates we're in summer session. So with that approval, the design team is going to start on schematic design, anticipating that we're going to have the MSBA's blessing on that. And then we have the same schedule for finishing up schematic design, submitting it to the MSBA, and getting a project funding agreement in place with them at their January 27th, 2016 meeting. That allows us to then have the special town meeting on February 8th and the debt exclusion vote on March 1st of 2016 that you see at the bottom of the page as special meetings where your normal meetings are in May.
Alan, is there any possibly that the July 29th date might not happen? No.
Not likely, no. What would happen for that not to happen is if we missed getting it into them.
Okay.
They're going to have their meeting on that day, and as long as we make our submission on time in November and get the December 3rd on the DESE submission, and also they'll vote on the 27th of January.
So as long as we have our documents delivered to them, they will review it regardless. There is no possible that they may say, you know what, not complete, or you don't have time next time.
They won't say it's not complete. What they may do, and we know that way ahead of time, is that say when we put in the preferred schematic report on June 11th, the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, when they look at it, they may say, this isn't the right way to go. You know, we think there's a better solution to this. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we've proceeded along a logical path here. I think they'll see it the same way. The only time I've seen it once was up in Templeton, where we just had an impossible site, and the conditions around the site were just not conducive for an elementary school. And they said, we're not even going to take this to our board. And so go back and find another site. That's not the case here. So as long as we get it on June 11th, and the Facility Assessment Subcommittee looks at it, and it gets the approval on the July 29th meeting, everything after that is kind of systematic. You're kind of in a lockstep then, and everything kind of flows pretty smoothly.
What are these two last dates?
Those two last days, in the gold stars,
Yeah.
those are your what I assumed were your in 2016, where you're going to be your town meeting and debt exclusion vote in 2016. I put those in there because at one point in time, typically you would have the warrant for this go into those sessions instead of as a special meeting and a special vote.
And what happened to the February 8th town meeting?
That's on there. You see it on
Yeah.
the green star. That the February 8th is a special town meeting, and the March 1st would be the vote for the project funding agreement.
So what has to happen at that special town meeting? Just to
2/3.
fresh one.
Oh, what has to happen to that?
Yeah, just, because that's going to need to coming up.
we will have, on January 27th, we will have from the MSBA what their, the total budget for the project and what your reimbursement rate will be, and you know what is, the budget for the project is, and you know what MSBA's grant's gonna be at that point in time. So the warrant goes out to that the town has to vote to approve the full project funding, knowing full well that the MSBA is gonna contribute that portion of the grant money that they're gonna approve on January 27th.
And is it a 2/3 vote in order to put it on the ballot? Is that what needs to happen, or what's the?
If you're gonna borrow money, you need a 2/3 vote at the town meeting.
And then you take it to the ballot, is that what
Then it
it
goes to the ballot.
Okay. And then it's my majority at that point.
And majority ballot.
There's no need for May 9th if everything's perfect. There's no need for another vote on May 9th because everything could happen.
No,
Right.
no, as far as I know. If you vote at a special town meeting on March 1st, I don't
As long as
believe.
the budgets and the estimates are fine and everything.
The budgets and estimates are going to be fine on, and blessed by the MSBA on January 27th.
Okay.
And that's where it locks in. So it's, we have to make sure we design to it at that point forward.
Okay.
And I've asked this before, but the dates have changed. What's the earliest date that we can go out of bond based on this schedule?
Yeah, you can bond portions of this, I guess, and depends on how you want to borrow the money. That would be something I have to talk with Chris about and figure out, the best plan of attack with how you want to get the money where you can use it. That's something typically I don't handle.
All right.
So, and I'm not an expert in going out to bonding funds for a town, but I've seen other towns do it in a portion up front, and then, as the year goes on, next year, bond for the balance of it. Instead of just have all the money bonded and sitting in the bank or something.
Yeah, you have to be careful of arbitrage.
That's why Chris has to speak to that. Any other questions?
All right.
Question for you, will I be able to get the form of the MSBA approved form of the ballot question, or am I at liberty to put my own ballot question together for March 1st?
You want to ask
Yeah.
us, what do you think?
I've seen specific language from the MSBA.
Because the question, the issue is going to become this. I have to give the town clerk 35 days notice before a special election. So that means I have to let her know by January 26th. Okay? So,
That's not tight.
yeah, so what I'm trying to find out, if I can get a form of a question that I can get the board of selectmen to schedule for May 1st.
I think we can talk to the MSBA and we know the numbers at that point in time that are going to go in. I mean, the only thing that could happen is they don't, for some reason, they don't give you the project funding agreement, then you're not going to have a vote anyway.
Right, but I'm just saying I have certain timeframes that I have to follow too in notification of the town clerk, so
Right.
that she can do her open enrollment for people to come in and register to vote,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So I just have to be careful with those things too.
Yeah, again, the January 27th is rubber stamp, if you will, by the MSBA. All leading up to that, we can be talking to MSBA, we can have all the language in place, we'll know what the numbers are. It's just a matter of that the meeting was held, the board voted on it, and it got approved. So everything's really happening prior to that.
Thank you.
All right. Question, design discussion?
Great.
Want to get an apron?
Yes.
So is Kristen.
Luckily, we're not talking about architecture. So I'm actually going to play a pretty small role tonight. We have Rachel Loeffler here from Berkshire Design Group, who's going to talk about this site. The purpose of tonight is to just get some initial input from the committee so that this preferred schematic report that we're submitting, we're getting a draft together, We will present the draft at the next school building committee meeting. But as soon as that school building committee meeting happens, we're sending it to a cost estimator. So the cost estimator isn't going to have detailed drawings to go off of, but if they can have a fairly detailed narrative from all of our different consultants, that will really help them, get a better ballpark cost than we would otherwise. This is all helping lead us to more detail to that schematic design phase, when they will have more drawings to get the cost out, and that's where we get locked into the cost, where we design to that cost from there going forward. So it's all kind of leading to that schematic design, which is the big, the important deadline. So tonight, we wanted to invite two of our consultants where there's really kind of some pretty major variables that can happen early on in terms that can affect the layout of the building and can affect the price. And so that's mostly site and mechanical equipment. We're not hoping to design the mechanical system tonight. That's TJ Hesner from Hesner Engineering Associates. That's their job. But to get your input on the amount of air conditioning, if you feel very strongly about types of mechanical equipment. Each school building committee is very different. Sometimes you have a school building committee that's made up with a fair amount of mechanical engineers that have a very strong opinion about how that goes. I don't think that's the case here in Granby, but we wanted to get your input. I think the air conditioning one is especially a kind of a big question, an important question. So TJ will present some of those options. And I have some other brief questions from our electrical consultants, acoustical consultants. I think that's about it. And then we'll talk about public outreach in next meetings. So we're on our schedule, and I'll turn it over to Rachel to talk about that.
So there are two things that we want to cover today and get your input on. Most important right now is getting your input on access and parking. And the second part that we'd like to get to, but we might truncate depending on how this goes, talking about some of the play ideas we're thinking about generally, nothing specific, but general comments. So this is our, just to orient you, this is our existing site here where we are today, right here. And this is the junior senior high school. So one of the biggest questions we have is when we combine the two schools is what will our parking demand be, and are we making the right assumptions about that? With zoning, we are free to have the number of parking spaces that we think is feasible. We're not limited by zoning requirements. So we're making an assumption, and we need to hear from you if this is the right track, that if we leave the senior high school parking counts as they are, and then we combine East Meadow School parking numbers with the West Street School numbers in our new design. Is that something, this is what the total site number would be. Is this something that, does that make sense to you guys? Do you think we could reduce parking at all?
Christian, what did you design in your proposal for option one?
For right now,
Yeah.
we have close to the max, 356. So right now, and to me that looked like a lot of parking on the site, but some questions is just how to feel like, does the parking at this campus right now between East Meadow and the senior high school feel small, feel too much? Is all of the parking at West Street used on a daily basis?
Wait, so you're saying existing 76 parent parking lot, parent spots at West Street currently? Yeah, I can show you the plan, how it breaks out. That's the next one, West Street is this version. So this is our site. This is how it plays out on site right now. We have 2 parking lots for the high school, 84 and 17, and 15 visitor in front. We have a lot out front with 56 spaces, which is our understanding are teachers and visitors. And then we have a shared lot between East Meadow and the high school, 76 total, but this is the breakdown based upon the diagram we talked about previously.
Is school day going to start at the same time for all kids?
No, it'd be a double-engine run and a secondary run. The other thing too about the parking at West Street, East Meadow, there may actually be some consolidation because there will be some families who have children now in those 2 locations who it will be a single vehicle rather than 2 vehicles right now. there may be some double counts because of siblings.
So for drop-offs, whatever estimate you come up with, you consider that one spot, you consider static?
Yeah, yeah. So we took any parking spaces that were existing from most schools, and we used that for the numbers used here.
The spot between the two schools, East Meadow and the high school right now, right there, one other purpose for that one obviously is when we have games, sometimes school buses or the visitors tend to park over there. That's why it's, we have a lot of parking availability on this site.
And the other piece to that is, which I had noticed, is sometimes when there's games in such, the buses actually pull into the pavement area behind the school. They actually pull back there. Just the other day, I had noticed, actually after we had a parking discussion, I happened to notice back there that the buses were pulled back there for like visiting schools that were coming to play our school. So that space is ended up utilized by those visiting teams and by spectators coming to the games.
And to clarify, that's usually after school hours?
It's after school hours. It's not using it every day. That's what I think.
Is there a drop-off path? I'm not seeing the traffic flow.
Yeah, maybe we can go to the next
Right.
slide.
Right now, there's not, but in the proposed, there is. Right, so right now we're just showing existing and we're just counting parking spaces based off of the surveys and the airport.
This is the West Street School, and this is just to show there's a smaller lot at the front where the buses drop off, and then what we would call parent drop-off, 76 spaces, the majority of the drop-off ones.
And the back, those are not just parent spots.
Okay.
Most staff park back there, and they're pretty full when it's drop off and pick up.
But we're holding this number in our calculations. Next slide. So this is now our current proposal for how we're laying out the parking, and we'd love to hear from you if this makes sense. So at the high school, these are the existing spaces and lots left as they are. And then this is the lot in between the two schools, slightly enlarged. And we have a separate bus loop in here with visitor and teacher parking. And then what we've done is we've pulled out any of the high school parking and put it over here so that the parking area for here is only for the East Meadow School. And
Say it again, what is this, 67?
those are additional spaces that we've pulled out of this lot that are existing used by the high school, and we've ganged them up over here.
So right now, there's roughly 56 high school spots at that middle lot. And we're taking those 56 spots,
And
adding a little bit more and putting it over there.
The only issue with that is the high school uses those front fields now for gym and sports.
Yeah, some practices.
The other thing I don't know, is we can sort of talk about that for wet there. Very wet.
You've got a bus loop there. Where are the parents dropping off? I hope it's not the same loop.
So maybe we can go to the next slide to talk about how this relates to curb cuts and bus drop-off. So in in the existing situation with the high school and East Meadow, we have two curb cuts onto 202. Next slide.
Yep.
And then we have a designated bus drop-off area in front of both schools. Okay, next slide. So what we're proposing is to add a new curb cut in between. Next slide. And then we still keep a bus drop-off in front of the new wing of the school, and we'll keep the bus drop-off as is at the high school. Next slide. And then that allows parents to enter separately from the bus area to the drop-off area, and then the high school area has its own.
I'll make a motion that we keep the number of parking spaces as the original design.
Keep 356-ish.
That's my motion.
Any discussion?
Will they allow us to pay for that parking lot over in front of the high school under this grant?
So the number of spaces are the same. So if we have to meet the same number of spaces, we have to pay the same amount of area. So the question is, are we just displacing it?
I'm worried about the reimbursable.
It would be covered.
Will they reimburse us to build that parking lot over in front of the high school?
They always look at the OPM. Question goes.
You're
It's
the
a
money
good
man.
question. It's a good question. We could certainly try to incorporate it into the plans, but it may be something that kicks back up.
But we are, in this scenario, when the disruption exists to the parking, right?
Well,
Replacing it with
I think so. That's gonna be cool.
Yeah, and there's a rationale for it, and I agree with you, Joe. I mean, that we'll do the best sales job we can, but, you know, when MSBA says, no, we're not buying that, you know. But I think there's a good rationale for it.
Well, so then can we push the middle parking lot back? Or make it bigger? Because then it would be reimbursable because it's part of the,
Yeah. And so
There's fields there.
I think,
What we're trying to do is not mix high school with elementary school parking.
This is girls softball.
Was the plan, I believe, that Rachel was trying.
yeah, and what we can do is we can go back and look at this and see about how far, maybe we can squeeze in a little bit more up here. We're trying to stay away from the ball field backstops, but maybe we could squeeze in another row or two, and we might be able to squeeze in another row or two back here on this, but we still have the same.
What does it entail to get that curb cut? Do you have to deal with the state? How easy a process is that?
It can vary, but you have to talk to Mass DOT and submit a report. We gotta get an approval for that.
Question for the principals: when there are events, do you find it, as well as some experience? When there are events, is there
Never enough
all over
parking.
West Street.
Never enough parking.
never enough? So in that sense, I mean, I think that bodes towards consideration of a higher number. The other thing that I've been part of the design of new places is using, like the outdoor basketball court as overflow parking for events that can be designed so it can be sealed off and a gate open or something, because there are a few times when you need a significantly larger number, and if the playground can double for that, that's one way of addressing it.
So thinking back to the design that we saw last week or the last time we met, there will be a nice gym in the new school that will also have a stage. So going back to the question that was just asked, if there will be potentially more events on this side, I think it would make sense to keep more of the parking spaces closer to this building as opposed to building so many on the high school side. I mean, that's basically the end of the property. That pertains to the number. But are you also asking which design and where those spaces should be?
There are two questions. One, should we design to the number that we've been talking about? Checking in on that. And the second question is just checking in on this strategy of breaking out the high school from the seasonal parking. That's the second question.
Christian, can you go back to the slide that shows how you would originally design the parking?
Oh, this.
That's what we've been looking at
Yeah.
all
Yes.
along,
Yeah.
right?
The only thing that's changed from when the committee has seen it last is that we had the buses pulling off here. And we had the parents dropping off here. But with a meeting with the principals and the superintendent, it made more sense to switch those and get the buses right in front.
Is there a reason why we couldn't put parking places in that space by the road?
in front of the existing roof.
Right.
Here?
Yeah.
I think you're trying to maintain some front lawn
Okay.
to the building, and set it back. I mean, it's so beautiful now, but that's the ambiance of the campus here.
That's fine.
What we were noticing is, and I don't know, we're just looking at the site plan, and right now, the new addition comes out to about the same plane that the high school, comes towards the road. And so we were realizing that kind of,
Visually.
is a nice distance from the road, and it's a nice setback, and so I think the further from the road we can keep that pavement, the better.
What is right behind the high school? There's a square there. Is that something that,
Volleyball.
is it, what?
I think it's, there's a
Sand volleyball
sand-
court there.
There's a sand, 2 volleyball.
So I'm wondering whether there is an opportunity to take those additional parking spaces they created on the high school side, and put some of them at least, if not all, behind the building. And the reason for that, going back to what Alan was saying, I really think that there should be some lawn and there should be some landscaping, just makes it visually more pleasant. And if we're going to do that, that actually goes with the same principle. If we make it disappear in the back of the building, that might
Because you could potentially move that sand volleyball stuff. There's space on the other side between the parking lot and where the tennis courts are. You could potentially
Right.
move that over there.
Who would you park on the septic system?
Right, we'll have to
Yeah.
keep that in mind too.
All right, so I'm feeling like we're not gonna have an answer in terms of layout tonight, or?
Right, I mean, we still have a lot of design to do, we're not,
This is just.
but to get your general input is very helpful.
Okay.
And it seems like we've got some consensus from the comments, which is great.
I think there were kind of 2 points that were made. One is if there's functions and stuff, if people are coming in that probably that main entrance, you know, that's where they're going to be coming in for like functions and things in the building. So, yeah, so you almost wonder, like, and you had brought up the point of right now there's a lot of parking and there's not going to be as much parking in the front. I don't know if that's an issue or not. That was a good point, I felt like. But the other thing is, I think that it's nice to have the increased amount in the middle because, like I said before, with the functions that are behind the building and the sporting events, that parking lot is limited. So even if the one that we were adding to the high school, they got added where the volleyball court was, as you just said, that would even increase the parking a little bit more, so that the buses and things would no longer have to access the pavement behind the building.
There's a lot more parking than there is now, a whole lot. So in case of functions happening, unless all 3 schools are having a special function at the same time, there's going to be a lot of parking
Yeah.
compared to what there is now.
Yeah.
That's why I think the number is okay. The 355 is probably an okay number.
Yeah.
So do we want to take a vote on that? Just got a motion and a second motion on the number. All those in favor of that number of parking lot spaces?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay.
Something else that we just want to touch on is that there is a fire code requirement that all corners of the building must be within 250 feet of a fire lane. And so we started to measure this out on site. And looking at that far right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner of the building, it is just shy of being 250 feet from our parking areas and our access drives. So if we use that flexible hard surface area, also double it as a fire lane, we can then have all of the buildings within 250 feet of access. So we'll follow up with discussions with the fire chief to see what he wants in terms of clearances and materials. Different fire chiefs have different ideas about what they want, and we'll design to that. But this will be what we do. We also want to check in with you about waste management on site and how many dumpsters we should be having. We met earlier and talked with Deborah and Jen about how many dumpsters they have on site. And we're assuming, again, that we're just combining both amounts of waste collection on one site, and we need to accommodate that amount of waste. Is that okay?
How big are those?
They come in different sizes,
Okay.
so we can match what you have existing.
I guess we'll be dependent on the runs that the waste management company can make. Is that?
Like if you're talking about high school, that's what we have for a dumpster that size. And I don't know that there's a more than once a week.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is fewer dumpsters with more runs with the waste management company, which may or may not be possible depending on the contract with them, instead of having tons of dumpsters somewhere and, if waste
You probably have,
Well, the school contracts with waste management.
Yeah.
okay, so it's separate, okay.
Yes.
The town uses it.
And it's only one run. And they'll pick up the two things or whatever.
And we like to ask people this because everyone is in a different place, but we'd like to ask just to check, do you foresee a need for compost collection at all within the school or on site
Immediately or in the future?
in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well,
I'd
we
like
tried,
to see
we
that.
tried, yeah, we tried the composting program a few years ago. It didn't work the way it was intended, but that shows me that there might be interest. Right now, we don't have a program, as far as I know, composting.
I feel a little bit like, I mean, you have to have someplace to take it. You know, we wouldn't have on-site composting, right?
No.
And, I mean, so, I don't know who would receive it. I mean, are there people receiving this kind of stuff? What I was looking at actually was the anaerobic digesters. It was one of our South Avenue, out of Route 47. But I mean, I don't know where it would go. We don't have a stream in place, I guess, or have any thoughts on where that stream would be.
Yeah, there are different ways to handle it. One is an individual or a homeowner type where you have your own standalone small system, which is something that could be an educational application, but not facility-wide. And then we've seen entire towns and cities putting in their own municipal compost collection system, which brings its own challenges. But if that's something that we need to make space for or accommodate in our waste collection areas or somewhere on site, then we can design that in.
And a lot of it will depend on whether or not, because we contract out for food service, whether or not Chartwell's would be even wanting to get on that network, and whether or not that would impact the contract they have with us.
It seems like
Compost, you mean? Well, that's a great point. I'm also thinking that since we're going to be looking at different ways of spending our money, how and where we spend our money, right? I'm thinking if our contract with the waste management company will be dependent on the amount of stuff we dispose, including the organic stuff that we could compost. Will this be, in the long run, some savings? One. Number two, we are in a community that has a lot of agricultural heritage. Would this also be something that is of value from that perspective? It may be used pretty easily in many places, potentially.
Are any special laws on it coming?
yes,
Yeah.
there's actually the governor has a plan in place, even though I don't think it's been executed. Yeah. My friend lives in Montreal. They do curbside collection of food waste. I mean, this is an eventuality. The question is it 5 or 10 years from now or 20? And how much of the design problem is it? I guess it's not a big design problem. I'd say go for it.
It would be a shame to close the door to the possibility of having, such a great educational tool available. I mean, if we don't design it in now, we've said no for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, we just require some checking of regulations and whatever about what we can and cannot do. Yeah, because Board of Health would be another place.
Can you check with the Board of Health and see what requirements they would have?
And going back to what Tom was saying, so we make a decision as to whether within the next 5 to 10 years we might want to do something like this, and we say yea or nay, and then it's done? Or is there a possibility to bring this back in the next several years if
It's more for us to understand what we should be designing, keeping the doors open. So it could be something where we size bins and we have places for this type of collection in our design, but it's not actually part of what gets built. You can come back later in 5 or 10 years and have an extra collection area in the waste collection area.
Yeah, I think we need to check on some regulations, because I know in other districts where I've been, they have done things like food waste to local farmers or whatever else, and have then been told that they can no longer do that. And I don't know whether that's the local Board of Health or whether that's a state reg or what the deal is, but that would bear some checking into.
Glad you asked the question.
One other thing we noticed is that there are a lot of exterior storage pods on site, and we just want to check in how those are used and if there's a need for exterior storage with this project.
Hopefully not.
Okay.
A little shed next door that we don't quite know what we're doing with.
Oh, the greenhouse? I don't want to take a sledgehammer too, because it's a lot.
I heard that.
It's not.
Probably not.
It looked like the greenhouses, parking was just demolished.
So the greenhouse is going away, right? I mean, is there a need to store snow blowers on site?
I think my understanding, there is a storage issue. I've heard people and others say that there's, so if that's being solved in the new facility, great.
I mean, it doesn't need to look like this.
Right. That's,
It could be red or green.
Just to get your attention.
this is what would happen if it wasn't.
Well, that's what it looks like now.
Yeah.
There is a storage shed, actually, and we are storing things here on site. And then we, in fact, have some things that are running on site and we have to go and retrieve them when the season changes. So there is a need for storage, yes.
And is this maintenance equipment? What's being stored?
Maintenance equipment, some of the machinery that is used, huge fans for summertime meetings, and they have a lot of stuff all around.
I have one rusted one with old things in it, and two that look exactly like that next to it. If you open these, you'll see our storage of desks and
Where
chairs
are
on
the,
the stage in the corner. Like,
sports
there's just
equipment?
not space for them. And like, you don't get rid of them because you don't know from year to year whether or not you're gonna need them, but you just store things in the corner.
There is, my understanding is one of those units is being used by the school, is that correct, Jeff? The one that's closest to the school, this school is being used
Yeah,
for.
and I actually, well, yeah, and I know, like, one of the ones at West Street, I was actually over a vacation I was looking at because we had received some desks from UMass that we were trying to see where we could use them. They were kind of just being stored there for now. Like, I had gone down to your bin. I've never been in any of the ones here. I have no idea. I think a lot of it's maintenance stuff.
Well, here's what I know, and because GAA was using that storage facility.
Oh, are you talking, and you're not talking about the one out front?
No,
You're
this
talking
is
about the blue one, yeah.
And I was told like 2 months ago that GAA had to get their stuff out because the school needed to put stuff in there. So I thought that the school was using one of the units for school-related stuff. All of the other units are all sports-related equipment.
I
Nothing-
personally
nothing-
don't know what went in there, but I would probably guarantee it's probably maintenance stuff. There's a
Okay.
lot of, equipment, the things that they use around. But nothing the only one that I've actually been in is the one from West Street,
Okay.
where I know this. So I know exactly what's in that one.
Get that snowblower out of the superintendent's office.
Yeah.
That's what I do after I call snow.
Sure.
Okay. So we met Jen and Deborah and Judy to talk about play and how it's happening today and how they see it happening in the future. We got a lot of good input. And also wanted to just kind of give you an overview of some of the things that we could see happening here. Again, this is nothing is designed, but just sort of get your general gut reaction. So possibly have 2 separate play areas separated by age group. More play opportunities than what's existing on site at East Meadow. Shade is really important. We heard that students huddle around trees on hot, sunny days. So if you accommodating that would be great. Keeping in mind all the seasons and making sure there are areas that are plowed and kept clear for the winter months, not only for the students, but the baseball team apparently uses the back paved area to practice and when it's really snowy out. We heard that balanced playground and ADA accessibility is very important, and having seating and table areas for students to catch up on schoolwork while everyone's playing is also helpful. So looking at our current site plan, we're thinking that we could separate out the 2 play areas on 2 sides of the building, and each age group could have its own entrance onto the site. And then those are some of the elements that we heard about, having swings and a tricycle loop and slides incorporated for both age groups.
Christian,
Yes.
in the original design, did you have two play areas already designed?
Yeah, it was bubbled out, similar to this.
Now it's great.
We've also read a lot about play and developmental milestones with children of different age groups and how important it is not just to have play in terms of active play and running about and being on swings, but there are other parts of play that are important to accommodate in the play experience. Giving spaces and materials for children to build with, having areas for social play and games, and places that have textures or sounds that they can engage with. And then what's really important is our spaces that are quiet and more pulled away from major activity zones. And so the age groups that we anticipate designing for in this study almost breaks down into 3 different age groups. So the younger children are beginning to develop their interpersonal skills. They're starting to play in groups, but some of them might still be playing alone. They're really more interested in the tactile and building things. And so a playscape that accommodates that looks a lot different from a playscape that might be designed for an older age group, where they're much more active and running about and climbing with great footwork. Next slide. And so swings are important, and we're just, next slide. Some sort of climbing is often desired, but we also heard that safety must be managed, so we'll work with you closely on that. Just having open spaces to run. And then these are just some examples of whimsical other precedents that people are doing. This is a playscape where they use terrain and astroturf.
I noticed that there was a park there, went to a pride parade in park at Bridge Street School in Hampton. It was like walking on us. It kind of looks like Lord of the Rings.
Tricycle loops, having a paved path for kids on tricycles is very popular. Kids also like to run around and chase each other on them, so you can do that. Using terrain or landform can really be fun as well. And you can devise space that way pretty cheaply. Next slide. We heard that sometimes there are nature walks that take place during playtime, and that's a very important part of this play experience here, and that can continue. Slides that are either in embankments or freestanding, as we heard we desired.
No tubes.
No tubes, tubeless slides.
No tubes. There's a liability here on my back of my neck stand up.
And then really simple strategies that can really be interactive with kids. This is just a channel that was filled with water, and kids are playing with boats in it. I mean, it's a cheap installation. This gets hours of fun. Next slide. No, just standing up. Having places to dig in the dirt or play in the sand. Next slide. And sometimes more structured, typical stand walks that we're used to seeing. Next slide. And something as simple as taking apart a xylophone and nailing it or attaching it in a safe way to a wall. Kids can hit the sticks to make sound. Can be helpful. Next slide. And even no matter what is built, what can happen on a playscape may be independent of that. This is an example of some plastic tubes that were set up, and kids spend hours shooting balls down through the tubes. Next slide. Storage is something that can be integrated with benches on site for balls and hula hoops. And sometimes we've had schools want to incorporate outdoor classrooms or chalkboard space outside. And so our previous proposal had proposed a covered play area, and that's something too that we want you to think about as we go forward. If that's something that you guys feel like there's a need for on site, and that would involve some sort of shade structure. This one's more built. The other one's more in addition to the exterior play areas, there are 2 courtyards, which is a wonderful opportunity. Not many schools have courtyards except for West Street. And we heard from Deborah that the West Street courtyard is used for reading and quiet time, and sometimes science experiments. So if that's something that you think could happen here, we can design and make it happen. And then these are just some, again, whimsical precedents of how other schools are dealing with their courtyards. So this is a nursery school, and they have a tricycle loop in the center and some trees. This was one that broke up a massive wall with green planting on the side. This one has storage areas for shoes and some play equipment out there, but it's mostly aquatic. This one has a balance of green and paving. And something as simple as just tilting a plane and using some fill can really change the way a space is used.
These examples that you shared, are they all from this quadrant, the north, or is there a need to swap things depending on the season? And I'm from a practicality perspective and from a cost perspective, I'm wondering whether it's all applicable to our situation.
Sure. I think one of the issues that it might be good to hear about how West Street is actually managed in the winter.
It's not easy.
Do you remove snow in the winter?
We try our best to get as much snow off of the blacktop as possible. We have kids coming with snow cans and boots and have to go further to go into the snow area in front of. They really love to do that. They'll build mounds and slide down, and they love being out in the snow.
It's not even a matter of building these alone, but if there is anything artificial that will rot or wear off because of the climate.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you build the tricycle path and the second season the snow goes away but the path is all damaged, that wouldn't be good either. That's what I'm trying to understand, whether this is all based on where you are in the country, or is it all an option?
It's all an option. I think it comes down to the materials that we choose and its durability.
Two general comments. I mean, one is thinking through the maintenance. And sometimes there's beautiful designs, but we're not going to have somebody out there with a hedge clipper shaping it. And the other is to really do a numerical assessment of how many kids the playground can handle on an inclement day. Because in New England, of the 180 school days, you might find upwards of 100 of them where that beautiful grassy area is not accessible, and now you're trying to, but you want to get outside on the vast majority of those days. So really thinking about, can you absorb the numbers on a muddy day and still have them outside with something to do, even if that means sacrificing some of the aesthetics.
I think one of the things that behooves us to consider as well is to think about a boundless playground. The concept is that it is built to be handicap accessible at all levels, so that children and adults with all varying physical limitations can access all levels of the playground. Belchertown just built one and fundraised the whole thing, and then put it up with community labor. But it's being used by grandparents who can get to the playground with their child. It's, there are some veterans in town who have suffered injuries in Iraq and Afghanistan, who are able to access the playground and belong to their children instead of being sort of passive. And it's really a fabulous concept. And we do have children who are handicapped and going to need accessibility. And when a child can't get to a swing or can't play with their friends because they can't get to the higher levels of the playground, it's really, an unfortunate thing for them. you know, so you want to see what one looks like, then, you know, certainly encourage people. It's right out in front of Chestnut Hill Community School on State Street across from the police department. And it's got double wide platforms so a chair can turn, so the kids can transfer from their wheelchair into parts of the playground. And I really think that, you know, in the spirit of being accessible, if this is something that we would think about being open to the community during off hours, so that grandparents could access with their children, or a disabled parent could access with a child as well, that it would be certainly worth considering doing. That would be my recommendation, is to encourage you to think in that direction.
And they're a nonprofit that will come in and consult with you.
Actually, the boundless people had a little financial difficulty, so they're not so boundless anymore.
Well, their website says they're nonprofit.
But
yeah.
the concept of a boundless playground and, you know, and it being accessible for all levels and all kids is just, it's just really a fabulous thing.
And to piggyback on Judy's comments, the idea of, very few playgrounds have the amount of bench and seating areas, which is useful not just during the day, but also in the after hours piece. So I've seen lots of playscapes built, but, you know, the parents are sitting there and there's no tree, there's no shade, there's no bench. Because it should serve the whole community.
And the surface, you know, rather than being keystone or whatever else, they poured a surface so that it could be navigated by a wheelchair. And it's a phenomenal playground. If you haven't seen a boundless playground, you want to see what one looks like, just head up the street to Chestnut Hill. It's really fabulous. And there are no tube slides on it.
Or zip lines.
You can just see some kid getting stuck in there and we're in trouble, so. But
Too much piece of lunch.
But I mean, it really is that pretty much a wheelchair or a disabled child can get to any level in that playground that their able-bodied peers can get to. So it's allowing them to be able to play and just, when it first opened, just having kids that were never able to be on swings on any other playground in that town, them being able to be in a handicap accessible swing and just having the time in their lives is just, it's an amazing thing.
I was just going to ask, what level of participation does the MSBA? I'm learning to point these questions at you. Do they participate in as it relates to equipment, you know, recreational equipment?
Yes, you can put the equipment in. The cap, though, is once you spend more than 8% on the site, they don't participate anymore. So this is considered part of the site. So
Okay.
that's where it really cuts off. You get to 8% pretty quickly with just pavement, walkways, and utilities and things like that. So typically these things are above and beyond that.
Anything, meaning any, like even simple swing sets would be on the town, or?
Anything beyond the 8% would be on the town.
All right.
So they'll take, 8% is 8%, it's still a dollar value, so once you get beyond that, it's all on the town.
And what is the 8%? Can you just,
I'm sorry,
can you explain what the 8% is again?
8% of the project, the construction cost for the site portion. Okay, once you get beyond 8% of that construction cost for the site, they're not participating in a reimbursement rate. So say your site cost, you look at your site cost, your building cost, and you're at 12%. They're going to participate in the first 8%. You're going to be picking up 4% without any reimbursement.
And any one of these things that you shared with us, is there a deadline by which some decision needs to be made?
Actually, all these things can be designed in, and sometimes and then once we get estimates pulled together, and you find out that it may or may not be tipping the scale one way or the other, you can put them in as add alternates to be bid on. If it's come in low, we got the money to do it. Price it that way.
I think tonight was just to get general sentiment again, and we got some great feedback. There's still a lot of design yet to happen.
All right, we're going to shift gears and talk about mechanical systems.
Right, so you can't.
How about the DEP update?
Oh, that's a good idea. Sure. Why don't we cover that now? Because Rachel can fill on the DEP update. We've inspected the septic tanks. That went well. There was a few repairs that the DEP wanted to see immediately. And we've been talking with Ken, and it sounds like most of those have happened. So it would require Berkshire Design Group coming out for a follow-up inspection now that those repairs have been done, and then submitting that report to the DEP. But so far everything's looking good, and Ken has been pretty proactive in getting those repairs completed. So.
And the other piece of information that we have to give DEP before they make a decision are the number of students and faculty from the 60s, which the administration is working hard on getting those numbers to us, and that'll be part of what they take to make a decision.
How soon will they have their decision in writing?
Up to DEP.
Once around a month,
Yeah.
usually, to review. Very typical.
So a month starting,
Starting once they get the report. So we still have to do the secondary inspection, issue the report.
so going back to the dates that you shared earlier.
Right.
We were at mid-May.
Right.
Is there any possibility that this may cause some delays? What DEP's working on?
They've given us conditional thumbs up. So right now, we're going on conditional thumbs up. Anything could trip that up, but typically it'd be something that they're unaware of and we're unaware of at this point in time. You know, the engineers have studied it. We've opened up the systems. We've studied it. They're all functioning properly. They're all designed for 500 student capacity on site or a person capacity on site, which we're at. So it all looks promising, you know. But some glitch comes along. I can't imagine what it'd be right now at this point in time.
So I asked the question subsequent to our last meeting, and I might as well offer it here, given that we have an answer. I had asked the question, do we have any sense for what the useful remaining life of that system would be?
So Mark's the civil engineer at Berkshire Design Group, and he really didn't want to answer that question because he doesn't want to be on record. But he says, that the system was designed right. It's been underutilized, for the past 40 years. So that's good news. The soils are excellent. If he had to shoot from the hip and guesstimate, he thinks that it's got another 20 years without needing significant repairs. That's it. Sure.
Yeah. Christian also mentioned that you guys had questions about the well permitting process and the costs that might be associated with that. And we're anticipating a need for a new well just because of the current usage of the wells on site. And so we anticipate needing a new well and placing it into that no matter what. The cost for that is going to be the cost regardless of when we submit the permit or not. And the process of submitting the permit for a new well is really intensive in terms of time and materials. You actually have to go in and dig on site and spend most of your costs during the permitting process for a new well. So we would recommend to hold off on that until a later date when everyone feels comfortable with triggering that cost.
Right. We're thinking probably waiting until after the town vote, because really there's no information that we could garner now that would change our cost estimate going forward. There's no reason to incur that cost until after we're sure we
Can
have
we
a
use
project.
any of the information from the last fiscal project that didn't go through? Because they had talked about locating a well, that they were the property at that point.
Right. I think, yeah, it would be helpful to see how far they went
Okay.
in that process. That would be great.
Mechanical?
Mechanical.
Hello everyone, I'm TJ Hessner, here to talk about the mechanical systems. We're going to be going over a lot of systems here that potentially could be put into the building for the new project. This is where we're going to focus. I have a little presentation here on your HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. We'll start right away with the heating, the H. Fuel sources. Regardless of the type of system that we go with, you're going to have a boiler. That boiler is going to produce hot water, so you will be having a boiler lineup, new boiler lineup in the building. The fuel sources. Natural gas, understand, is not available out the site. We're looking at, right now you're on number 2 oil, and we certainly don't want to heat with electric. So we're looking at doing a hybrid. We're going to suggest a hybrid of number 2 fuel oil as continued, which you're currently using, instead of a propane. Now the propane in a BTU per BTU basis, number 2 oil versus propane is more expensive fuel. However, the efficiency of the equipment that we can get for the propane boiler is going to be tremendously more efficient than an oil boiler. So what we're going to do is phase it and have it, the propane boilers handle what's called the shoulder seasons, September, April. That's when you use lower water temperature for your heating, and the lower water temperature you use, the higher efficiency of the equipment. Propane equipment can reach efficiencies up to 95%. So your bang for the buck will be, you'll see that in the shoulder seasons. In the thrust of the heating season, January, February, we'll convert over to the oil system. You run at 85% no matter what equipment that you use, because the water temperature required is higher. And I don't know if you're familiar with, we're going to talk about some boilers that has to do with condensing technology, condensing boilers. If anyone's familiar with that and heard of that, that's a high efficient boiler, and the lower the water temperature, the better. And that's where the propane will really lend itself. So, heating. We can heat with water, or we can heat with air. We will be heating with water, and I'll explain that in a minute. Now, a hydronic heating system, that's what you have now. You have a boiler set up, and it pumps hot water around the building. It pumps it to coils, it pumps it to unit ventilators, it pumps it to air handlers. We'll still do that. So you require a boiler, you require pumps, and you require piping. We're suggesting and recommending that on the existing renovation, that all of your heating system, HVAC system, is replaced, with the exception of your 2 newer rooftop units. Circa 2 years ago, I think you replaced them. So we're going to try and repurpose those. They're brand new and should really try and be reused. Air side. Air heating has to do with the furnace, air handling units on the roof. It's moving air, a medium of air to provide your heat as opposed to water. And a good rule of thumb is it takes a 2x2 ductwork to move as much energy as a 1-inch pipe. So that's where the benefit of heating with water really helps. However, you have to bring in outside air. You have to ventilate, which we'll talk about in a second. So get the next slide.
Can I ask on the propane, are they underground tanks for fuel storage? I mean, it's got to be a lot of fuel.
Well, again, it depends on how much you want delivered based on the tank size. So that's going to be discussion. But yes, all the tanks we'd be recommending are underground. The oil tank will have to be a dual shell. It'll have to be metered or monitored. So yes, we're looking at underground utilities. Anything's open for discussion, but we're recommending that they be buried. Certainly. So here's a couple jobs that we've done. These are propane boilers, hot water boilers. These are oil boilers. Oils normally take up a little bit more square footage, but it's amazing that the equipment in the last 50 years, how much smaller it's gotten. You'll see these boilers, these giant boilers have you replaced with a couple of shoe boxes out there. Not quite, but it's amazing how much smaller that they are. So that's essentially what you're going to look up, a lineup of probably 2 propane boilers and maybe 2 or 3 cast iron oil boilers. So it'll look similar to that. Okay. Now, staying on the heating, you have a real opportunity, in my opinion, in your addition, especially with the elementary nature of it. I know I have elementary kids; they're always on the floor. With the new, you're going to be pouring a new slab. I'm suggesting we really take advantage and look into put in radiant heat. That's hot water in the floor. There is no best, but in my opinion, it's the best type of heat. You can get it. You can control it tremendously. This is a very nice lineup of an example of what it is, many zones, but what it looks like in the mechanical room. And it's just a very nice way to heat, keeps the floors warm, and you have real opportunity in your new building to consider that. So that's going to be strongly considered. Anything else on that? Christian, I know you're a proponent.
No, I mean, we're doing that right now in South Hadley. Again, at pre-K through first grade level, it seemed to make sense. Here with the addition, again, the addition is going to be pre-K through first, second grade. So it does seem to make sense to do that in that area in particular. It is a little bit more expensive than some of the other heating methods. You know, so there is that to consider, but you're pouring a new slab anyway, you're putting in your reinforcement in there anyway. I think this diagram on the right, you know, really illustrates, you know, it puts the heat right where you want it, you know, as opposed to the heat coming in from above through a ventilation system where it has to get mixed with all the other air. Makes a lot of sense.
Is maintenance more expensive too?
No, I mean, it's a wash really as far as the maintenance is. The maintenance is all in the mechanical room and the chemicals and the filtering of the water, and regardless of the system, it's not.
No repairing a broken pipe in the slab.
Well, okay, maintenance on a broken pipe is a completely different situation. To be honest, as long as it's poured right, it's commissioned correctly, and you know it from day one whether there's a leak or not before it's poured, these work. I have not experienced a leak, however, I'm sure it has happened, and that is a major failure. So I don't know if that's considered maintenance as much as a tremendous failure. So yes, that would be a big project, report. Okay, also other methods of heating would be, this is radiation heat, radiant heat, and it'd be located along the perimeter. There's really two different methods. One is, this is spin tube radiation. You may have it at your house. It's covered with just a decorative color, but the main heat is out of these fins. Water passes through the fins. Air is convected up through it. This is a very nice way to heat also. It heats right under windows at the perimeter. A nicer, more decorative application is a radiant heat panel. It's the exact same principle. Air comes, convects up through it, but it's a full panel. There's water that rides through these panels and then down into the floor. Naturally, this is much more expensive. You take the opportunity and put this in visible areas. You wouldn't put it in a toilet room or a janitor's closet. But if the budget allows, this is always a nice element. There isn't, especially with your elementary nature, this does get hot. You're passing 180-degree water through it. This can get up to 160 degrees. That's borderline scalding. There are protection devices you put on the front of it. It's a cover exactly the same as this. It's just a non-active element, and we use them in elementary schools all the time, but they're definitely needed for that. So they're very nice looking panels, and that, if we end up going, I'm sure we're going to have some sort of perimeter heating element similar to this. These would be suggested too. Again, we're very sensitive to the budget, but they do look very nice.
Quick question, I noticed there are outside walls and water running through them.
Yeah.
Any issues with the Northeast having such cold winters?
Only if it freezes. is the
That's
problem.
what we worry about.
Yeah, what you don't do, they get installed on the outside, in the interior or the outside walls. That's where they're put. The piping does not run in the outside wall. That stays on the inside. You take an opportunity to run it on the inside wall and over. If in fact it has to run in an outside, we insulate between. We look at that, but we do everything we can not to run the pipe itself in the outside wall.
Would it be fair that, especially given that we have a lot of kids with allergies and stuff, these might collect dust? I think I was hearing the word dust as you guys were talking. It may require a lot more maintenance compared to, say, the sub-floor.
Certainly with the in-floor radiant. Yes, this especially, if you go through, I walk through a lot of older schools, we do see it collects a lot more than dust, gum, and paper, and things like that. We look to have a slanted top on it, which whenever you see it collecting dust, it's always a flat top, and there's a lot of things put in there. These covers do come off, and yes, there is maintenance to clean it. It's mostly not dust, it's just paper put in there, and it happens. These here are generally, they get wiped down, but there's no opportunity to collect any paper rim. It's a solid product, really. But yes, so yes, there is maintenance associated with anything we talk about. There is maintenance, but yeah, I would think once a season you would pull the covers off and clean inside. Okay, classroom heating, unit ventilators. This is what you have now in your classroom. It's a unit ventilator on the outside wall. And looking inside a unit ventilator, what it consists of: a supply pipe and a return. This is hot water, pumping water through a heating coil. Air comes in, it returns air through the front. There's fans back here. Air returns air through the heating coil out to the top, and it circulates like this all day as long as the fan's running. The other thing that this does is it does heating and ventilating. This is backed up to a wall, an outside wall. Oftentimes, this is what you do here. There's louvers in the back of them in the outside wall that introduce the outside air. We have to bring outside air in for all the occupants. There's a certain amount. Anytime an occupant's there, you have to bring it in. The drawback you have today is you really have no control over how much you're bringing in. It's either open or closed. My guess is in the winter you're probably closed. So you're really not. You're either under ventilating or over ventilating would be my guess. These, to be honest, we don't see a lot of these going back in. It takes up room in the classroom. It's also noisy. So with the concern of these in the classroom, the other thing is it brings in raw outside air. So you're taking in all this -7, -10 degree air, and you're heating that entire area. You're not getting any heat exchange, which we'll talk about in a second. When we talk about heat exchange, though, they do make, this is big, it's a refrigerator in your classroom, but they do make classroom units. This is from a unit that we did install that does do heat recovery. And what heat recovery is you've already paid for all that outside air you brought in. You've already paid to heat that up to room temperature. You have to exhaust it. You bring it in, you have to bring it out. The building's not a balloon, so you have to bring out as much as you bring in. As you bring it out, it passes across the air that you bring in, and it recaptures some of that waste heat. So that's heat recovery, and I have a better picture illustration of that. But they do make some unit ventilators that do heat recovery. The ones that you have now in a traditional one does not. It brings in raw outside air. That would be difficult to get through lead also. You'd have to really make a lot of points elsewhere if we go back to the unit ventilators.
Just want to bring up that we worked with Hesner on the Hoosick Valley Middle and High School out in Adams, Cheshire. And there we were doing a renovation, very small addition, mostly renovation. And for budget reasons, and it also had a crazy time schedule in terms of construction, we replaced their unit ventilators with these new heat exchange ventilators. And we did that so that we didn't have to introduce new ductwork into that renovated space. Again, like TJ said, it did take up quite a bit of room in the classroom. We tried to combine it with the built-ins as much as we could, but it definitely does look like there's a refrigerator on that outside wall. But something to think about for the renovation portion of this project is, do we want to go with a new ducted system, or do we want to try and replace the unit ventilators that you have now with something more efficient, but still is a unit ventilator?
These will certainly be discussed for your renovation, certainly, and we'll have to see. To be honest, I don't know if they make a horizontal one. This was 3 years ago. They may now make a horizontal unit that has the heat exchange. Now, whether I can find 3 vendors for the competitive bidding is to be seen, but we're going to uncover that pretty soon. So this will continue to be discussed. Ducted systems. Okay, now you're also going to have ductwork in the building. For bringing in outside air, we have to use ductwork. As you can see, it's a lot of room in the ceiling. Like I said, 2x2 duct or a 1-inch pipe, same amount of energy. This is going to, a big driver of how much duct we're going to end up with is going to be based on our air conditioning discussion, which we're going to get to in a minute. If you decide to air condition, your ducts become larger. You need more air to air condition than you do to heat, and you don't need as much air if you just do outside air introduction. Ductwork, the best way, in my opinion, to do it is to take your outside air and handle that separately, and duct that in separately, and handle your heating separately. As we'll get to in another slide, You can do heating, ventilation, air conditioning all through the same duct, through the same unit. That makes the ducts bigger. Or if you do just outside air, it makes the ducts smaller. So it will fall out as to the amount of duct that you have, but in the renovated areas, it makes it difficult to put ductwork in a building that we can't control the ceiling height. So you may end up with exposed duct. Now, these are higher ceilings, and it was easier to do, but it's a challenge in a renovated area, which may then lead us to the unit ventilators. So we'll be bouncing back and forth between systems as we go. Okay, so that was heating. Now we're in ventilation.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Of all those options you shared with us, is there one that you would say is more efficient than the other?
The efficiency comes from the way you make the heat with the boilers. So that's really where your efficiency is, and it's also with your control of it, with the pumping of it. All your efficiency is really going to happen in the boiler room. The rest of it has to do with the controllability and the temperature controls out of the space. The best control is the in-slab heating. That's where you get the best and least complaints. Then it'd be the wall units at the wall, the perimeter units, and then it would be the unit ventilators, because you're just blowing so much air that every once in a while you get a draft complaint from that. So it's more controllability as opposed to efficiency at that point.
Are you going to propose a boiler in each building?
Probably not. We're going to look for. I think we're going to look for one central heating plant. I'm sure it'll be discussed, but it just makes sense to get all the heating plant in one space, to pump it off from there, unless getting the pipes from one building to the other is difficult. And I assume when you mean building, you mean the addition, right? However, anything's on the table now, and it may lend itself that the addition is a perfect size for a perfect frame that they happen to make for a boiler, and it may make sense, but my gut tells me it'll all be out of the same central boiler plant. Ventilation. We need to bring in outside air for the occupants in. There's code requirements, and it's based on CFM cubic feet per minute of air per student, plus a cubic feet per minute per square foot. So there's when that individual's in there, you have to bring this amount of air in for them. It needs to be heated and cooled. We can't bring it in at 90 degrees, and we can't bring it in at minus 10 degrees. So we have to heat it and cool it. Dedicated versus integrated. This is what I was talking about. A dedicated system is a decoupled system. It's where you just simply address the outside air, and you bring outside air into the room, and you bring it in room neutral conditions. 70 degrees is what you introduce it at, and you take care of that separately. Then you do the heating and cooling with a different system. That's is generally what you see in the newer schools, and that's the best way, in my opinion, to do it. Integrated would be through one central system. For instance, your 2 existing units that are going to be reused, that's an integrated system that will bring in outside air and distribute that air for heating and cooling. So that's an integrated system where you do it all through one system. Exhaust. We have to bring air. If we're bringing it in, we have to bring it out. Opportunities are in the toilet rooms, janitor's closets, the kitchen, and other spaces too. Through the air handler itself, we'll bring the air out. Again, the components of this system, there's ductwork, registers, grills, fans in the unit, and that's a large component of the control also is the outside air. Now, that's a very expensive proposition, is heating and cooling all that outside air in the Northeast. It gets from 95 down to minus 15 this year. So we look to do what's called demand controlled ventilation. That is controlling the amount of air that you're bringing into the building based on demand. For instance, this cafeteria here, 100 people could be in here. You have to size the system to handle for 100 people. Tonight there's 18 of us. So if we did not have demand controlled ventilation, we'd be bringing in air enough sufficient for 100 people. We're all here breathing. Demand controlled ventilation will measure the amount of CO2, carbon dioxide in the air as it returns back to the unit, and it'll lessen the amount of air in to keep that. It measures a certain parts per million. So then it reduces the amount of air to handle our 18 people. We're all going to go home. There won't be anybody in here. So then it'll not recognize any CO2 and shut it off completely. Heat and energy recovery, we're going to get to that next. Again, that's the outside air. If we can take that minus 7 degree air coming in, and I use minus 7 because that's a design condition. If if we use -7-degree air, and we pass it with our 70-degree air, we could get free heating up to about 40 degrees. So we can recapture that heat. Now we're heating the air from 40 to 70 as opposed from -7 to 70. Same if we air condition, we're going to take it from 90 down to about 80, depending on how much air we do. So that's heat recovery, and we really, by code, we have to do that. Okay, packaged rooftop units. This is what you have for your two newer units. They look similar to this. They're up on the roof. This is a bottom discharge. It discharges right down below the roof and distributes duct above the ceiling. These units heat, and normally they're gas heat, so we're not going to have the opportunity here. So they're going to have a hot water coil located in the ductwork inside the building. They cool, it's called direct expansion cooling, integral the unit. They have a condensing unit in there and then a cooling coil where they're air conditioned, and they ventilate. Here's where outside air comes into the unit, and they'll also have a little exhaust because you bring it in, you have to bring it out. So that's called a packaged rooftop unit. This is a rooftop unit, and when you, for renovations, you see this. This is duct on the roof. Sometimes it's necessary because there's just not enough room above the ceilings. We try and limit this as much as we can. But every once in a while, you have to get the air in, you have to duct it in, and if you run it on the roof, it's just difficult. It's outside in that weather. Now you double wall it, but it's outside in the weather. It makes replacing the roof difficult. So we really try and reduce the amount of duct on a roof, but it does happen. Okay, I've been talking about this. Outdoor units, energy recovery. This is from that Huzik job. This was a dedicated outside air unit. So it was sized to handle all the air, the outdoor air for the students and occupants in the building. And again, the way that it works is you bring air in. Here's hot outdoor air. You bring it in, and it is actually a wheel. And picture it like a wheel full of straws. So air will go through the straw this way, and air will pass through the straw the other way, and the air will not be in contact, but it will liberate its heat. So that's almost exactly how it works. And as it passes in, it recaptures the heat or the cooling and passes it in. And we'll definitely have a few of these for the new system. It just will depend on if we're doing a dedicated outside air, decoupled, or if it's more of an integrated system, really yet to be determined. Okay, this is new. This is called displacement ventilation. You'll do this. This would be on the table if you select air conditioning. We're doing this at a school right now. This works on a different principle. You over-ventilate, so the duct gets a little larger, and you bring air in at a little warmer temperature, so the energy efficiency is you don't have to cool it as much. Air literally floods the bottom of the room, and you have all the people. This is the natural buoyancy of the people in the heat. The air comes up, and it gets the contaminants up into the non-breathable zone and returns it high. So a drawback of this is the size of the equipment gets bigger because you're bringing it in so slow. So you have large supply diffusers. Again, strategy, you can bring them in, and for your new building, you would never be able to do something like this in a renovation. And again, here's displacement ventilation. This is a mixing system is more of a traditional system. You bring it in at higher velocities. It's what you have in here, and it forces the air down. And this is, we'll call them contaminants, mixed in here. Displacement has, we can call it cleaner air at the bottom and the contaminants up at the top. So that's new, and we're seeing that a lot at newer schools. Okay, air conditioning. Can we talk for a minute, and if I can get your thoughts as to what your expectation is or wishes for air conditioning in the building? Certain spaces, the whole building, some spaces, that'll be a big driver for what we do.
Will the building be used in the summertime?
That's question one. The whole building? Maybe.
Certainly the office for starters.
Currently, we have the office, and within the office, it's, the principal's office is in here. Principal's office, the conference room, the other office, the nurse's office. That area right there is air conditioned as well as the library. The offices that are kind of connected to the library. That's the only areas here that have the air conditioning.
Special areas, right?
None of those areas are.
It's a grid block.
Floor plan.
For the proposed.
Maybe this is.
Yeah, but you can see it on there. So we're currently across.
Here, right?
Yep, that whole space.
Right, so that will remain air conditioned. But is there any thoughts to classroom air conditioning?
Well, thoughts are one thing, but, you know, it's
The
just.
reality.
I don't know. We don't know.
We don't know what you're talking here in cost. I mean, you're telling us luxuries, but is this luxury going to increase our project 25%, 30%?
Well, as I stand here now, I don't know. It's certainly going to be more than 0%. So we could certainly.
What have you done in the past? I mean,
In the past, there's two discussions. There's the upfront cost and then there's the operational cost. So you have to buy it and you have to pay for it to operate it.
we got to do both.
You do have to do both. So it's not fair for me to sit up here and say, okay, where do you want it? I guess I'm saying if you can start thinking about where you think you may want it, where you know you won't want it, on our end is where we work towards, okay, here's what this is. If you tell, sometimes you walk into places, no, we don't want any air conditioning. And then the last one we went to, they said, we want everything air conditioned, including the boiler room. So they said that right up the bat. So you never, a reasonable question is how much is it going to cost? And we can work towards helping you with that. So
Down West Street, we have just right off this air conditioning. My administrative assistant doesn't have a chance of administration at all here. And 2 special needs classrooms.
with the through the wall units, right? Yeah, yeah.
So that's actually a good point. There might be some areas where the students, may need some additional air conditioning and stuff, so that's a conversation to have. But you have 4 bullets there. It seems to me that if we're going to use portions or some sections of the building for community purposes, whether it's, town meetings or some other events, it would be good, at least in summertime, just have the ability to air condition it, because, for instance, our town meetings can be unbearable sometimes, especially the one that we have in June. This may really temperature town meeting. Thank you. And the computer rooms. I mean, we want to make sure that
Those have to be certainly. That's have to.
Yeah.
Computer labs are,
Our computer lab is air conditioned.
but then, by the time this project's done, they'll go on the way to Dodo.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I mean, so it's really, but think of where that server is.
Serving. I think ideally, but it does come down to cost. Ideally, especially just in the last 10 years with, kids with asthma, and a lot of it is just rooted in the dryness of the conditions now. And it's not going to get any better. So you'd love to be able to air condition, because I think that may help. But I think the challenge is the cost.
But I think one issue in terms of flexibility is there a way to think about, designing the rooms so that if we needed to put window units in the occasional classroom for a child who might come through. We have a couple of kids in the school now for whom air conditioning is a requirement. I don't necessarily envision that being the need for the whole school, but it's a big process to get
Yeah, we have
a room air conditioned in an old school.
Yeah.
We have a student in the high school who actually has to have the.
But and that would be something that if we design something, I don't know whether it's how the windows are placed or where the electrical outlets, come forward, but so that if we do have to retro air condition a room, it's not going to be a major project.
Okay. It would really depend on the room that window air conditioner could handle a small room here, but it certainly wouldn't handle a classroom, so.
I'll just put out some examples to think about from previous projects. We have one where they air conditioned all of the rooms, but not the hallways, not the common spaces. The idea being that you shut your door when it's hot, and that was a cost-saving measure. We've done other schools where they didn't do the classrooms, and they just did the admin and the nurse, and the library and the GM
because of that community use issue. One option to think about here is maybe we air condition the new addition and we don't air condition the reno part. That might, be a detriment to the 4th through 6th grade classes. Something to think about. So those are a few options that we've done full air conditioning everywhere. It's also.
What's the possibility of doing parts of the air conditioning as an add alternate?
You could do that, but it could affect the type of system you choose. You would certainly need an air system. Now, the add alternate to it would be whether or not you buy the condensing unit, really. Let me go through, why don't I, at this point, let me go through some air conditioning systems. Is this my next slide? Yes. Okay. Equipment. All right, I'm going to go through these systems real quick, and then we can get back to that, because there's some that would limit you, some that you could, some that you couldn't. A newer type of system is called the VRF, Variable Refrigerant Flow. This is a new system that we are using a lot in renovations. This is a refrigerant base. This is refrigerant piping, and there's one condensing unit located outside, and this refrigerant piping is daisy-chained to indoor units. So all you're running is 5/8 inch refrigerant tubing instead of big ducts. This is air conditioning only. It heats also, but this is not outside air. This is only for heating and air conditioning. I got a few of these, Chris. You're going to go to the next one.
This might be a good one where it could be an add alternate, because you just have these cassettes throughout your building.
This is something you could, for instance, on your renovation part, the existing part, you could put in a VRF system, and that could, because you're going to have to heat it with a different method, so either add it or you don't. So this is something that could be an add alternate. Now, as far as the business, same with the VRS system, a terminal unit is an indoor unit. It has a lot of flexibility. This is called a cassette. It would be it would look something just like this, and you would think it was a diffuser. This is a fan coil. It's up above the ceiling. This is a smaller cassette, and maybe you've seen it. This is a wall unit. I don't know, Mitsubishi has commercials on these. This is just more of a commercial system. This is on the floor, a fan coil unit. These are two floor mount, another floor mount is a fan coil unit. There's a lot of flexibility with this, and all you're running is refrigerant pipe, so it's not obtrusive at all. It's a nice air conditioning system. Another benefit of it is it does simultaneously heating and cooling. You don't want this as the primary heating source because it's still a heat pump. I don't know if you're familiar, but up in the Northeast, if it's an air-cooled heat pump, when it gets very cold outside, the refrigerant doesn't work so well. When it gets down to -15, it can't guarantee the heating. So that's why I said we'll always need that boiler system. However, it does have a benefit. There are zones in the interior that are going to, I'll point to this one, that are going to air condition all the time. All winter, the interior of the building is going to require air conditioning, while the perimeter is going to require heating. So that's going to take its warm air from the interior, push it in the refrigerant, we'll then use it for the perimeter. So it's going to share that heat. It's a very efficient system to heat and cool with, and it does the same in the summertime. So that's, you can heat and cool with these different cassettes, all plugged into that same unit, and it does recover its heat fairly nicely. A split system. A split system air conditioning, and this could be add alternate also. This is what probably many of you have at your house. Inside you have, we'll call it a furnace. It could be an air handler. It's what you have for, actually you don't air condition. If we were to air condition the cafeteria, you have a unit up in the mezzanine area above your gym, and split to it, you'd have the condensing unit outside with refrigerant piping connecting the condensing unit in your inside unit. So that's called a split system, where you have the condensing unit inside and your evaporator, that's called inside. That's your furnace inside doing the cooling. So we could see these as add alternates also. And ductless mini splits, this is these Mitsubishis that you see the commercials on. This is the condensing unit outside. This is what we'd use in a computer room or a localized. These are smaller units. They're 3 tons, so they're a little bit smaller. And you can connect a couple indoor units to the same condensing unit outside. A drawback is they can't heat and cool at the same time. They're either going to both air condition or both heat. And just wanted to show you this as a proportion in terms of rooftop units. Rooftop units will air condition. The one in for your library is similar. It's an air conditioning rooftop unit. They grow as you add accessories to them. There's a unit similar to what you have for your cafeteria here. It's a fan with heating only, so it's a certain size. They do get big, and you saw that picture of all that duct on the roof. Space does get limited. Cooling and heating adds condensing units to it, so this, in proportion it grows. Then when you put energy recovery in it, there's a wheel in here, it gets longer, and you do end up with some buses up on the roof. I mean, this does get large, so you just have to be careful with selection and in location, but that's the newer buildings are easier as opposed to the renovation is going to be not struggle, but the challenge. Okay, so back to air conditioning with your add alternate. Certainly the VRF system could get added with if we end up doing air conditioning on a rooftop unit, it really couldn't because you're running the duct, the air handling units are going to be the same either way, so that you're buying on during design really. So there's some commitments and yes, there is a way to do that alternate air conditioning. So I know that was a lot. I just wanted to come here and talk about some systems that we're going to be thinking about. We're going to come back and talk again. We don't have to decide anything tonight. Just want to introduce these to you. And you're going to get a nice system, but we do understand about the budget here. So
Thank you.
we are receptive.
Submission at the end.
Drop out.
Sure, yeah. For the preferred schematic report, should we submit that with a full air conditioning narrative to get, again, this is very rough prices from our cost estimators. But is that kind of a start at that basis and then we can dial back and see how that affects the project, or what do you think that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to.
I don't think you need to go full. I think that would cost too much. It's a luxury that is not needed here in New England unless we're going to school 12 months a year.
I think the whole building, I agree with him, the whole building is a luxury which we can't afford. There's no question in my mind about that. Which portion of it, administration maybe, I can't imagine it's air conditioning in the gymnasium.
Yeah.
Wow, what a vault that would be. That would be that's just my personal opinion. Someone else may have another one, and please listen to it. But not an air conditioning gymnasium.
Well, let's give it some thought. Maybe when we have our next school building committee meeting, we can bring up this topic again. But I think it would be helpful to have an approach for now that can certainly change going forward, but to an approach to start with in terms of getting an estimate on maybe air conditioning all of the new and some of the select spaces of the renovation.
I mean, to me, I think if you're going through the process if it's not going to be an incremental cost to incorporate air conditioning, and we can dial away from it at a later date, and in all likelihood we're telling you we're going to, to me it wouldn't hurt to at least get a sense of what the price is, because I do think, whether we have this issue today, I think we are going to have to, going forward, we're going to have to accommodate or at least be in a position, so it might make sense to at least think about it and factor that in. I don't think we're going to air condition in the gym. And so
I don't.
Should we also be looking at, are we going to be running duct, or are we going to just be running the coolant pipe? Because that would be a different factor too on these things. Because one of them we said just run a 5/8 inch refrigerant pipe versus a duct into the wall.
Now, for consideration for the gym, based on the occupancy, that's going to be an air handling unit with duct. So the incremental cost to step up to air conditioning for the gym may only be an incremental cost. You're going to be in that system because you have a lot of outside air you need to introduce. The ducts are large just inherently because of the nature of the activity in there. It's going to be an air handling unit, adding a refrigerant coil to it and the air conditioning to the unit may not be that much cost. So those are things that can certainly be budgeted.
Is there a rule of thumb that if the whole building is air conditioned or the whole building is not air conditioned, that you could say you increase the cost of the mechanical system by 20%? I mean, the rule of thumb I've always said is that a cost of a building, 25% of the cost of a building is your mechanical system.
Yep.
It's a lot. It's a big ticket item. Is it now 30% with air conditioning, or is there something?
If I just had to pick a number, if I just look at the air conditioning as one cost, I would think if you add air conditioning, it's probably a 20% upcharge
To the cost
to
of
the
mechanical.
mechanical.
So,
Many
and
things
the
factor
overall
into that.
cost of everything, then, if mechanical's 25% of the cost of the building, you're adding 25% to that. We've added, what, is that 5%, 4% on top of the cost of the entire construction?
Closer to 6%.
Thank you. I was looking for John's answers.
I'm going to sit next to John. I know we agree with you here.
You'll break it down the logarithm for me.
So, between heating and air conditioning, which one is the option, if there is such a thing, that sets us up for future investment? If we say, heating is done in such a way, for instance, we have to heat the building regardless. We choose the heating system that may allow us to add air conditioning afterwards. Is there such an option?
Adding it afterwards would be very expensive because you're back into the school. However, to go the route of add alternate, I would think you're going to have the boilers. Let's take your renovated area. I think, quickly thinking, the boilers with perimeter radiators on the wall, not the unit heater. Get rid of the unit heater, put in perimeter heat at the wall, put in an outside air unit just to handle the outside air. So now your renovated area has heat and it has outside air. That's all you have to do. And then add in the VRF system for air conditioning, which you could either install or not. But you probably have to make that decision during this construction. Sure, you could do it later, but that would be very intrusive.
And you were talking a lot about heat recovery, heat exchange. I was wondering whether there's something similar that allows you to get the cooler air from outside, but just keep it uncirculated in a while inside, so it doesn't heat up as quickly.
Air conditioning is going to return as much air as you can while introducing a minimum amount of outside air. So yes, inherently, we'll be doing that. Keep circulating it inside, introducing the minimum amount of outside air. Usually about 20% of the air gets changed over. So about 80% of that stays in the building as recirculated air.
But we need air conditioning for that.
That's for an air conditioning system.
Do it in a way that heat exchange is doing for heat, to keep some of the outside fresh air that might be cool enough for most of the school year anyway.
Now, that's something called economizer. On a day like today was 50 degrees out. What you would do today is you open up, it's 100% outside air. You bring all that 50 degree air, that's what temperature air conditioning comes in at. So you bring all that free outside air, that's at the perfect temperature, you bring it in. Now you have a very cheap way of air conditioning. And again, that's on the shoulder season. So yes, that's called economizer, and anything we do would incorporate that.
Okay.
How about chilled beam systems?
Chilled beam systems, again, you see those a lot in larger schools, larger renovations, that you need a chilled water source, so you then need a chiller. And just the extent of your renovations, in my opinion, don't really lend itself to a chiller with chilled water with limited air conditioning. You have to really have a big air conditioning load. I would say you might need 100 tons and you may have 20. You're that far off before you start thinking about a chiller.
Air conditioning or partial air conditioning, if it does not commit us to any price at this point, we can look at all the options. That would be great.
Can I just, so you had said that in this current building, the areas that have air conditioning now, they would still have the air conditioning, is that what you said? Or is that
It's up to
system
you,
going to
but
be revamped?
it's definitely going to be revamped. we're going to make every effort to reuse the two, because your library is going to be a courtyard, right? So that's, and right now, so.
That won't be it.
So the inner offices and stuff.
Those inner offices will be,
And that's not necessarily marked for like offices anymore, they're marked for like resources right now.
it has changed a little bit, so
Yeah.
yes, we're going to try and reuse those 2 new units, which have air conditioning. So we're going to try and reuse that. And to answer your question, yes, we're going to restructure that, redistribute it.
And the system itself is going to be, I don't know how energy efficient or anything is this current system that we have. Is that going to be done, looked at to see if it needs?
Yeah, if it
Because
doesn't make
It's a very
sense.
old system and I just am putting out there, it doesn't
Beyond
always
those
work
2
properly.
rooftop units?
No, just in terms of like ventilation and stuff.
Oh, everything else would be completely.
Okay.
All the boilers, all the pumps, all the pipes.
We just got them downstairs.
I think that's the trick, is that in general, the new school that will come up later with our energy conversation, but you know, the new building is certainly going to be super insulated. We'll do the best that we can with this building. You know, our windows are going to improve vastly, our doors are going to improve vastly, but we are also going to ventilate much more than you are now to meet codes and to meet LEED requirements as well. So it means a healthier indoor environment, but some of that savings that you get from that improved envelope and more efficient equipment will go away just all using more energy on all of that new air.
That's a good point, really.
Something that
Is there a better system for the lead points? That would,
Oh, yeah. Certainly, the more efficient the system, the better the lead points, and believe it or not, that's the most expensive system, too. So it's a mix of all that, getting the lead points, getting the best efficiency, and observing the budget. So that's really most of what we do.
In talking to TJ and Mike Krasinski, who's also with us, maybe that's another reason to go with the propane boilers. Is to if you go with just oil, it's very, very difficult to get LEED points on efficiency, which is the major category where you can get LEED points. And actually, MSBA has a mandatory minimum number of points that you get in that category. So by going to a propane boiler, that really helps with that specific point category in particular.
So what else do you need from us tonight?
Okay, a few more. Fire protection. One question is a server room for this new school. And our electrical engineer knows more about this than I do, but what facilities do we have now for a server room? Do we picture this as becoming a server room hub for the district that we're putting in this new building, or will it just serve this building? Do we have any initial ideas on the size and complexity of that server room? Okay, something to think about. We don't need to have an answer now.
The tech director and I are driving to Cambridge together tomorrow. I can tell.
There we
What
go.
the car conversation will be.
Perfect. Is this going to be a new server room with new server equipment, all new racks and everything? This is.
It would be
Yes.
lovely.
So you're increasing the load than what you have now?
Hmm?
So you're going to be increasing the load than what you have?
We'd like to have the
Okay.
capacity to do that, yes.
Yeah.
Said tech lead.
Christian, I
yes.
think on fire protection, I'd rather hear what the fire chief would advise for this kind of question.
Okay.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
I hate to make a decision and find out that
Oh, right.
he's going to go 180 degrees.
No, certainly we'll.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I'd rather have you talk with him first, get his input on what he would like to see in each of these bullet points, and then bring it back and then we can go.
Okay. Well, some topics to bring up for the community to think about is we will have a buried tank outside. One question about that buried tank is whether it will also have to serve hydrants on the site. And so that, I think, would be a question for the fire chief on how many fire hydrants, or if it would just serve the building itself. Right now, we're thinking about an exterior buried tank on the site. A less expensive option is to raise that tank above grade. but it does take up room and can be unsightly. Another possibility is potentially putting it in the basement or under the slab of the addition. Our structural engineer, for now, wanted to keep it as an exterior buried tank to kind of evaluate.
I wouldn't want to put it under the slab, just in case something happens to it, then we're in real trouble like that.
These are big tanks, too.
Yeah, they're about 10,000 gallon tanks.
And Sutton was 80,000 gallons.
Because I think we put one in for the library, I think it was either 10 or 25. So,
Probably was like
the library at the street, right?
your library's probably 20,000 square feet.
Could very well be.
A lot of books.
What do you mean by your last bubble up here, prepare sprinklers for the high school? We're not going to get paid for that.
We wouldn't be sprinklering the high school, but if we're going to be putting in a tank with a fire pump, it might be a good idea to consider where it goes and if that system could be used for the high school, if the high school was to get sprinklers in the future. You know, the sprinkler buildings in general are becoming much more common. There's a pretty, sincere desire to have even houses become sprinkler new houses. So it's the way the code is going. If you renovate a building, they're chopping down the amount of square footage every year before you have the sprinkler. So I think that it's a good thing to consider that at some point, if the high school stays on this site, if we have a new high school, if we renovate the existing high school, it will have to be sprinklered. So to have 2 separate fire tanks and 2 separate fire pumps, 2 separate generators serving those fire pumps. So,
But 2 separate project funding agreements.
Right.
All signed.
Right.
Hey, you could have 2 parallel tanks sitting on a tank farm. You maybe have the same fire pump operating from both sources.
well, I think, and I talked about this very briefly with Mike Kaczynski, but we're going to look into whether it would have to get much bigger. It might not.
Pump itself may not.
The pump itself, man, because it'd be either you're gonna have a fire over there or you're gonna have a fire over here. And just and the source water, you have to have the source water in case there's fire in both places, I imagine.
I think for that question to do, I want to know what the fire chief or police
Right.
before I entertain.
Some plumbing questions. Most likely we'll have a new oil tank. Most likely it'll be in the same location as the old or similar. Questions on the renovation side of it. Remove all waste pipes in existing buildings. Remove all storm drain pipes. Replace all domestic piping. I think we would advocate for that. If we have new water heaters, should they be oil or propane? I think
How
that
about
will
solar?
feed into that.
How about solar?
Yeah.
Just-
And a lot of property.
And you have good southern exposure, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wind farm over
No,
No, I don't want to do it.
no.
Those turbines, if they get spent too fast.
And Chris, do you mean photovoltaics or solar hot water or both or?
Solar hot water.
Solar
Yep.
thermal.
Yep. Great.
Absolutely. Have you thought about the drains in the boiler room and the fact that
We're just
we
gonna
need
seal
some
them up. We're
sort
just gonna
of
seal them up, and that's all there is to it.
containment?
That's your-
Well,
that's
that
your
would be
endorsement.
another one. That
That's your
would,
endorsement.
thanks. What a guy. But we need to think about some sort of containment unit because there is nothing at this point in time.
Yes.
I'm sure DEP will have some say on. Or drains.
They have already ruled on that. That we need to do something, and there are drains both here and at the high school. And one of the suggestions that was given to me was thinking about a tank that could take both boiler rooms, obviously. We could pay, we could pay for it, we could have it part of the building project. All we have to do is pay for the piping to connect away from the high school. but DEP has been looking the other way on this issue for a very long time. I think if we don't put something into the design, they will not look at it that way. Right now.
Chris, I have a question for you.
Yep.
You said that you would recommend replacing all domestic piping.
Yes.
Not related to that, but based on that, I'm assuming you made some assumptions as you were coming up with your cost estimates. What portion of all these things that we've seen tonight actually was included, if at all, in your estimates? Or are we just looking at all extras right now? No?
I would say we have a few things here that may be something we hadn't thought about, but everything that we had thought about was all brand new. So, we start talking about solar panels with plumbing in them and things like that. I don't think we envisioned that. I'm not sure we envisioned at this stage of a fully air-conditioned building, but partially air-conditioned building. And because up to this point in time, we're just using $1 per square foot value times the number of square feet.
Right.
And we're using historical numbers like $350 a square foot, roughly, which is all inclusive of these systems. At some point in time, that number breaks over the 350, though, and it goes above when you start adding too much.
So is it fair to say that if we do not go with some new or experimental system, or we don't air condition the entire building, we're not going to have major surprises compared to what we have seen so far, as far as cost is concerned?
Yes. For what we've been talking about here, no. I mean, we're still staying right. We're in budget numbers with very few exceptions.
So I just wanted to give folks an idea of, we talked about trying to touch this building as little as possible to keep the renovation dollars down. And certainly we tried to do that in terms of preserving structural walls and things of that nature. We would recommend, and we're going to include in the preferred schematic report narrative for now, is removing and replacing all waste lines and roof water, site water lines. That involves cutting the slab and excavating that out and excavating that pipe out. As we move forward, it might be worthwhile spending some reimbursable dollars on having those pipes evaluated, either cutting a section out or sending a camera down there to see if that's an expense that we could avoid. But for right now, given the age of the building, we would recommend going forward with the removal and replacement of all of that construction.
What does the blue and the red mean? Is that
Blue is water from the roof, and red is wastewater.
Did you look at putting a sleeve in the existing pipe?
I think these are too small. I don't
I
know
would
if that's
say
a pipe.
Can't
They're
reduce
about
it.
4 inches.
Right.
That'd be tough to do.
Other questions coming from some of our other consultants? Thinking about the two different stages, right? We have one that we're proposing to keep here, a larger one off of the gym. I've been told that there's not necessarily a great place at the high school for performances. Will this one that's in the gym become a venue for bigger performances than we would typically see at an elementary school? So acoustic concerns might be a higher priority than they would otherwise.
I would think so. I don't know what everybody else is thinking.
That's great. The kitchen, is it a full service kitchen or warming kitchen? We've been imagining so far of a full service kitchen.
Especially when you have students that would have to
yeah,
serve
you'd have
at
to,
one.
I would think you'd have to,
Great.
full service.
Right now, we're thinking about one generator that would serve both the school and the fire pump. One thing to consider is what that generator should be able to power in an emergency. We've had some school districts where they want that generator to power the kitchen, so that if the power goes out for the rest of the town, that kitchen can be fully operable.
I believe we have a generator that runs the kitchen over at the high school.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not necessary here.
That's what I'm saying. I think we already have one that goes to the high school kitchen.
But definitely, if there's gonna be a server room here, that would need to be powered.
Right, and life safety elements within the building for
Yeah.
sure, so some lighting and,
Yeah.
but a big one is whether it needs to power that big kitchen at a full capacity or not. So that's, and we don't have elevators, so that's another. Is there a desire to automatically power off receptacles for computers and appliances? This is kind of a detailed question, but when you open up questions to the electrical engineer, you never know what you're going to get.
For purposes, what is this for?
No, that's just basically
Energy
to
conservation. Energy conservation.
yes, right. Your phantom loads. Yes.
I think that's a question on computers would be a question for David. So before I would give that answer, I'd like to check.
That would help with legal.
Is there an override for some feature like this? Or if you press some of the rooms for an exam that's going to happen in the morning and we're going to use the computers, well, he doesn't want to go home and come back in the morning and everything turned off and whatever the setup is. Is there a way to override stuff?
There can be. There's some parts of the code now. It's a new requirement
Pick up all the emergency lights.
that some outlets must turn off. And usually those are just for the monitors. So you can keep the hard drives going, and monitors to shut off when the occupancy is. There's no occupancy.
There's a refrigerator out there.
But another thing, sometimes to meter the HVAC lighting and power load separately, again, that can go into a display that's at the front of the building and kind of introducing those topics to the students. But it does require, a lot more upfront work on the electrical engineer's part in terms of making sure that all of those can be metered separately. Again, it's a very detailed question, but I think it's something that has come up with our electrical engineer in the past, where they've been surprised at the end of the project that the client wanted this and they hadn't prepared for that ahead of time. So
Does this require more maintenance?
something to think about. I don't think so. I think there would be a slightly higher upfront cost because your wiring is just not going to be quite as efficient because you want to make sure to get your HVAC to one point where you can monitor it. But in terms of ongoing maintenance, I don't think so.
The only advantage of that is if you're renting the place out, you charge somebody back based on the meter, right?
Sure, or just
We're
for
not gonna do
educational purposes.
We're not going to do that. I don't think we're going to rent it, are we?
I'm planning on it.
We rent it for Jim Beaver's birthday party.
Now the parking.
Great. Well, it's getting late.
No, we're just smoking it.
We're just working out, right? So these will continue to go on, but that's really helpful to get initial input on these kind of bigger ticket items as we move forward with the first schematic report. In terms of the next agenda items that public outreach.
Can I ask one question that started way back when?
Sure.
When we started this, you were talking about we're going to make this submittal on the 11th. At some point, you said the committee was going to be taking a vote. Is that vote going to be on June 3rd? I heard the word vote by the committee, but it didn't kind of flow down this end.
Yeah, June 3rd. I was always
I
on the
believe it
impression
was
that
the third that we were looking at a draft for the next meeting, so you could take that draft and be reviewing it and then come back on the third and we.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I missed that. That's
Yes.
okay.
For an MSBA, you do have to vote to say this is a preferred schematic report that we all vote to submit to MSBA.
All heads on deck for the 3rd.
Right.
Right. So this is kind of jumping ahead to next meetings, but I had on my calendar that our next meeting would be the 21st.
Yeah.
And that's where we would have a draft of the preferred schematic report without budget numbers, but with some of the other information in it. And then we'd have another meeting on June 3rd, where we would have the numbers back from our cost estimator. We would have the whole PSR package, and we would vote on that so that we could get it to the MSBA before the 11th.
On the 21st, are you handing something out, or is it going to be a parking lot?
On the 21st, we are hoping to email something out to the committee a day or two in advance of that meeting so that you can take a look at it. And then on the 21st itself, I'd be happy to do either way. We could make paper copies or just kind of go over the highlights here, or a mixture of both.
I'm sorry, I might have missed something, but like, what do you think you're going to be going over on the 21st? What's the material?
I think it'll just be the highlights of the preferred schematic report, just so you know what we're reporting to the MSBA. I don't think it'll be any surprises from what we've talked about so far, but it'll be talking about our efforts at public outreach. It will be talking about the septic testing that we've done at East Meadow to make sure that that site makes sense. It'll be talking about the updated space summary based off of the new kind of updated Adveno scheme, and then some more information from our consultants.
So is it a summary of what we're going to be submitting on, or approving on the 3rd and submitting? Is that what you're going to present, or is it a full review of everything?
It's a summary of what's
It's a summary. Yeah, it'd be, what we're submitting on the 11th will be voluminous, and you really don't want to be reading through that and detailing it out. Just as long as the essence of what you wanted is in that report and it gets submitted, so that MSBA can say, okay, we've looked at these 6 options, and here's the preferred one that we're going with, and they understand that you've vetted all these other options out.
Absentee vote. I'm thinking we ought to table public outreach update until next week.
Well, we do have a subcommittee.
You guys gonna meet now?
I don't know, that we didn't know the meeting was going to go this long. It was a good meeting. It's just a few of us had agreed that we were going to try and meet afterwards, and I don't know if we have the energy for it, but if we don't meet today, we probably should think about meeting.
Can we stay for a few minutes?
We could probably stay for a few minutes if, I don't know what your thoughts are. Yeah.
Okay, so do that, you guys do that.
We should meet again.
After you adjourn?
Yeah, so after we adjourn, whoever's on the committee, maybe we can just meet for 5 minutes and just make a decision on when we can next meet and what our game plan is going to be, if that's okay. If there's 5 or 6 of us that are volunteer for it.
I'll just mention that that's going to be a kind of a critical part that the MSBA is going to look at for the PSR, is to see what public outreach we've done so far and what public outreach we plan for the future. That's high on their priority list.
So by June 3rd, we should have a good idea as to what the outreach we're requiring. Is that what you're saying? Or do we need something tonight that we need to bring back?
No, by June 3rd, we probably should have had some sort of public outreach.
We did have one. And we're just scheduling, we just made a decision, we have scheduled notify all the county.
And what would that entail? What?
It'd be a presentation of what the first schematic report is, basically that, a synopsis of that we've looked at 6 different solutions. We've landed on all the West Street solutions, all the East Meadow solutions, and that the best preferred schematic that we're looking at is addition remodel to East Meadow. We show them the timeline of where we started back in July when the OPM was hired to where we got to and submitting when we're going to get the project funding agreement in place, and how long after that the design team needs to do their documents, and when we're going to be going out to bid, and the duration of construction, so that they have a full understanding that once we have this meeting, we're going to start constructing next week. No, we're not going to start constructing for probably a year. So the people out there, they if they're watching, they might have an understanding, but maybe it's not a clear understanding. It gives them the opportunity to ask questions.
So we already have a meeting next week. If we definitely have to have one before June 3rd.
Well, I think the last time we spoke, we talked about doing an all committees meeting on June 3rd.
Wait, what?
The meeting on June.
We talked about doing an all committees.
Right, we
meeting
have
on
to,
June 3rd,
yeah.
right?
we have that
With
one.
the town leaders, is that the
Yeah.
town leaders
And it
meeting
would
right
be
on
open,
the
it
third?
would be open.
Right, that's what I thought I'm hoping we're holding to that.
We are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so would that be sufficient to satisfy whatever requirements we may have?
Well, it's not a plan, but it's
Yeah.
what we're working on.
Well, typically, the town leaders meeting is not a public outreach. It's more the town leaders got together, and now that the town officials know what's going on. But the public who send their students to the school haven't had the opportunity. It is a public meeting, so they can go, but it's always nice to have a special one that the public's invited to, that here, we're going to be making a presentation and showing you what's going on. You're welcome to come and have a cup of coffee and cookies and things like that. We'll stick around for questions afterwards.
How big?
Judy has nice cookies.
I will tell you, this was a little off my radar. I'm sort of surprised that, it sort of feels like at the 11th hour, we're trying to figure out how to do a public meeting. I think all along, we talked about keeping the committees, the
town
leaders
leaders.
speed. But this is, we can do it, but it feels a little bit.
It's not hard and fast, it's just that we need to show the MSBA that we have a plan, or 2 or 3 or 4 planned.
Right.
Going down the road, and that we've just gotten to this point, and we have the committee on board, we have the town leadership on board, we are doing public broadcasts, of all these meetings, so they've had the opportunity to view all these. And I think we've had 10 meetings since the last leadership meeting that we had on November 20th. So there's been a lot of changes, a lot of opportunities, a lot of development here.
But it shouldn't be hard, because if we have the June 3rd meeting with the town officials, the public outreach isn't going to be much different. It's going to be the same information.
Yeah.
So we could probably
Combine
schedule
it all.
something the next week
No.
with the same information, just with the public. And then we'd meet the June 11th deadline.
I think if these weren't televised, it'd be a whole different meeting.
June 3rd, we would, thinking we would have no discussion as a committee on the issue. We all would have taken place. We're not going to have the whole town meeting while we have a regular meeting and discussion.
Yeah, I don't think we really thought through the logistics.
I thought we were going to.
I thought we'd have a meeting from 6 to 6:30 and then,
6:30.
or at 6:30 to 7, and then 7 o'clock have the public officials come in.
So we have our entire discussion about whatever issue comes up for June 3rd and a half hour.
I would think we might want to start at 6, but 6 to 7 if we possibly can do that, and then have the,
Well, even then, I mean, if we're even an hour to make the final decision on this, it might not be enough.
I think the decision's been made.
Yeah.
I don't think there's,
All right.
I would hope that the decision's been made. I think that you might want to say, okay, I've noticed this, that you might want to change this,
Okay.
this portion, that portion.
We got discussion next
There
week.
shouldn't be any big surprises on the 3rd.
Yeah.
All right, so 6 PM, 7 PM,
Meeting.
yeah, public.
So then, are we billing the June 3rd meeting as an all committees meeting and a public outreach?
I think it's 2 meetings. I think
2
you have,
meetings.
from 6 to 7, you have a school building committee meeting, and then at 7 o'clock, you have a town leadership meeting.
No, but I'm asking.
No, and then the
because
next, no, that's separate, another meeting.
Can the public come on that one?
Can't
The
be
public
both.
outreach one?
Can't be both.
We'll set a date for that.
Why
Right.
can't it be both, you're asking?
Can we bill it as both, knowing that, the reality is, I think usually you get about 15 people from the public. But it's going to be oriented towards town leaders. We're inviting the town leaders. We're obviously making it open, so it's a town leadership meeting and public outreach.
And it was last time as well,
Right.
and I think we did have some of the public here.
Yeah, we could have press release.
I think that makes
And everybody
sense.
gets to ask questions.
I think
Yeah.
if we say in the preferred schematic report, we've done this, we've had televised meetings, we've gone out to the department heads twice, and then if we say, and we have a public meeting scheduled for June 17th or something, they might follow up at the feasibility assessment subcommittee and just say, oh, how did that public meeting go? Or, so there is some flexibility in there that doesn't necessarily have to happen right before June 11th.
Also, we created a subcommittee that will be focusing on public outreach anyway, so that's probably an indication of the desire to reach out.
Why wouldn't we invite the public? I mean, so if there's 25 of them show up, so what?
No, we should. And I think it's a
On
public,
the
it is an
third.
open
On the
meeting.
third.
Yeah, well, we invite the, I mean, I think we formally invite the town leadership.
Right.
And then we open it, it's also open to the public, that way we've got people invited.
Something gonna go out to the.
And anybody who wants to come is, yeah.
We're gonna send something out to all the parents of the PTO or something like that?
I think that's what the subcommittee needs to talk about, is what's going on.
All right, so let's get on to that. Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second, anybody? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, anybody want to talk about the public outreach